Tell me why most organizations don't have a digital talent roadmap.
Most companies today, so when we talk to clients and things, so when we talk to CXOs, CHROs, or the C suite, most companies today are quite serious about talent. So if you ask anybody in the leadership, they will tell you that typically no one's going to say that skills don't matter or we don't bother about internal talent or we don't care about that. Everyone agrees to the fact that talent definitely drives execution. But the challenge is when you ask a follow up question over there. If you ask them, show me your digital talent roadmap, that's when things start to fall apart. Skill intelligence today is becoming a very foundational thing. Skill intelligence is the idea that skills are now the new unit of currency. Most companies are making talent decisions with incomplete information. This typically makes the organization blindsided to make the right talent decisions. So, this is where third bracket comes in.
Most organizations today are talking about future of work, skill and their workforce. But very few actually know what skills they have inside their company. Today on the very first episode of Third Bracket podcast, we are sitting with Pat Cooper, co-founder Third Bracket. In this episode, we have discussed how AI is rebuilding HR. This podcast is like a complete masterclass if you want to win in the future of HR. Watch this complete episode till the end. Welcome back to the very first episode of our podcast.
Hi, Banu. Thanks a lot.
But tell me why most organizations don't have a digital talent roadmap.
That's an interesting question, actually. So, most companies today, so when we talk to clients and things, so when we talk to CXOs, CHROs, or the C suite, most companies today are quite serious about talent. So, if you ask anybody in the leadership, they will tell you that typically no one's going to say that skills don't matter or we don't bother about internal talent or we don't care about that. Everyone agrees to the fact that talent definitely drives execution. But the challenge is when you ask a follow up question over there. If you ask them, show me your digital talent roadmap, that's when things start to fall apart. Let's understand one thing also very clearly. A digital talent roadmap is not necessarily an HR document. People tend to think it's an HR document, but it's not because it's a living blueprint. It's a live document of skills, your capabilities, your mobility, and things like that. And the reason most companies don't have a digital talent roadmap is something which is very basic because most of them don't actually have visibility or they don't know what skills they actually have. And that's why that roadmap doesn't exist, right? Things have changed, right? Today, if you look at it, your workforces have become so noisy. Job titles keep changing all the time. Your roles are very hybridized. Projects become very cross functional today. And therefore, skills depreciate today faster than, I would say, assets within your company, right? And without visibility to that, you cannot even plan. So companies typically, because of this lack of visibility and a digital talent roadmap, they end up doing two things. One is they start hiring continuously from outside. And the second is they start training broadly without even knowing what gaps they're trying to address or solve. And that is where both become so expensive. Both are extremely a slow process for the companies and they should be avoided because they are definitely a drain on the system. The question is very interesting, but the answer is even more surprising. It's a very basic, right. But yeah, this is the reason why digital talent roadmaps don't exist.
Right. This leads to my second question. In 2025, we saw that what happened with the talent market. Like why future ready organization are now looking at skill focus, like they want skill focus talent, then they talk title based hiring. Like what's the main reason behind that?
So I think that's more of a relative thing, right? So skill intelligence today is becoming a very foundational thing. Skill intelligence is the idea that skills are now the new unit of currency. It's not in the talent world, right? It's not just your titles, it's not your tenure, it's not your degrees. I mean, I know of people who are hiring people from colleges, not necessarily they've completed a degree as well. Right. People who may have very basic skills to just get my job done. If they can create the impact, I would look at them and hire them as such. So there are companies who are doing that today, and that landscape is changing. And therefore, intelligence has a very different meaning, which is so much more beyond just an assessment, which was in the classical world that we used to do. And it also has about three or four pieces that need to work in collaboration with each other. So, for example, you look at skill profiling. What does skill profiling generally do? It tells you who knows what and at what level and in what context, right? So you profile those skills. You then need to have your role skill mapping in place, which tells you what does success mean for everyone in a role and what kind of skills they would actually require, right? So that's your role to skill mapping, which typically happens. Now, because you've done these two, an equally important part is also to do a gap analysis or a gap detection, which tells you where do teams have the capability shortage to manage for today, for tomorrow, those kind of things. And the fourth and the most important part is going to be your forward plan. So, and this forward planning ideally is based on strategy. So, for example, if you want an organization wants to go digital, or they want to go cloud, or they want to go global, so what should, in each case, it's a different scenario. So what should your talent typically look like as such? So these are the four areas which need to work in collaboration. And trust me, once you have clarity on this, you can really see some incredible things that can happen, right? So suddenly your learning stops being very generic. Succession planning, which has a strong, I would not want to get into any problem here, but which has a strong political connect in some places, right? And which is political, that stops happening. Your workforce planning starts getting more proactive rather than reactive. Today, you get a complex process. If your workforce planning is not in place, you suddenly get reactive, start hiring, you may not hire the right talent. It's a vicious cycle. So it's better that it's not reactive, but rather proactive. Most importantly, your hiring stops becoming more like a guesswork situation. So that is why if you have all these pieces that technically work together with you, you can see that skill intelligence, therefore, is taking a very strong position. It's becoming more and more foundational as such.
See, if a company wants to start with like skill intelligence, like what are the steps that you would suggest them?
So that's very important. It again brings me back to the top 4 points that I said, right? So we have to understand that skill intelligence is typically a concept whose time has come. They are becoming stronger than ever before. People are hiring more on skills. And like I said, the four pillars of becoming a skill intelligent is you need to start by doing your skill profiling. You need to do, more importantly, you need to start doing your mapping correctly, right? So your role to skill mapping is very, very important. Otherwise, you won't be able to scale. Also, equally important is, can I check and see what is the gap between what somebody is doing today and what skills are required? If he has to move up from a career architecture perspective and various other models, right? Does my talent or does my workforce have the talent and this required skills to move up front? What do they need to do? So that gap analysis is very, very important. And then, of course, if you have these three in place, you are very easily able to do your forward planning. You know what kind of projects are coming. You have visibility to that. So your workforce hiring becomes, and your planning becomes more proactive rather than very reactive.
Are there any specific patterns that you find in a company that they are losing with skill intelligence or something like that?
So when you say pattern, typically there's no such concrete pattern because each company is different in its sense, right? Their businesses are different. Even if they're in a similar business, their projects, their models could be different as well. So I wouldn't say there is something which is a growing pattern, but yeah, I think it is extremely critical that people realize what is happening much before the impact hits the business. So that's where it becomes more important for people to realize. So, like for example, I was talking to somebody and they mentioned about a big IT software company, right? A big giant. They were looking at some people being promoted and things like that. But eventually, what happened is they promoted some people who were functionally correct, but culturally they could not fit into handling larger teams. And within a span of, let's say, 6 months, they had half a team protesting against the guy as not fit as a manager, and the other team had left, right? So that is where that problem starts as such. So you need to be very, very careful and pick up these patterns. So if it's happening with one person, it's fine. But imagine this multiplied into 50 or 100 in larger organizations, right? You're going to lose a lot of workforce. You're going to have a lot of talent leak that's happening because of that. So you've got to be a little careful on that front.
What do you suggest? Like companies should start skill intelligence from inside, or they have to look outside for skill intelligence?
I think when you've understood what is skill intelligence, this question actually brings me to a thought of a very important piece that is happening today in the industry, right? internal mobility. Larger organizations are looking at things inwards to see how they can leverage, and that's quite a reasonable growth lever as well. Ideally speaking, if you ask a CEO what are the top three levers of growth, I can tell you that talent hardly shows up amongst the top three levers of growth. But talent mobilization will definitely and always will impact growth horizontally and vertically as well. So internal mobility, if you ask me, when you ask me look inside or outside, so within an organization, internal mobility is, I would say, an essential talent arbitrage. So you're maximizing what you already have instead of buying at typical retail prices outside with a 40% markup and various other things. It's cheaper. It's cheaper if you ask me in very basic terms. It's cheaper and it's for various reasons. So, for example, when you hire someone from outside instead of internal mobility will help you remove that onboarding mismatch, right? Your culture is already known to the organization, to the employee who's moving into that role. Your time to productivity, very important in today's day and age, right? Time to deployment, time to productivity, whatever you call it, right? So they know how to manage and operate in your already working system because you're already a part of the system, right? And there is another piece that is fairly important in certain industries is you retain the institutional knowledge instead of leaking it to your competitors. Today, if somebody moves, especially in the industry of learning solutions where I come from predominantly, if somebody moves from one company A to company B, which is a competitor, you ideally have this challenge of a lot of information leakage and various things in terms of strategy and things like that. So I'm not saying everyone, but in general, that can happen through general conversations and all. So the irony is that internal mobility typically happens. It's happening and it's happening informally, right? Today, it's happening in all organizations. It's not that it's not happening, but it's very informal today. Someone needs to be visible, someone needs to be politically connected, or they need to be at the right meeting to be considered, viable for an internal mobility position and things like that. So with skill intelligence, typically, and I'm relating it back to what we spoke about earlier, mobility becomes systematic rather than just a norm. So that is something which internal mobility impacts, and definitely it has an impact on the business. It has an impact on your revenue and various other things as well.
In traditional companies we have seen internal mobility, but in modern generation companies we have seen too less how internal mobility is working. But there are merits to it, but many times we have seen internal mobility failing. What's the main reason behind that?
Yeah, so when it works, right? People are really happy about it and things like that. It moves. But yeah, that's a very interesting thing. Internal hiring or internal mobility, if it's not done correctly, it can fail, right? And it often fails for the opposite reasons that we think. So what do I mean by that? It's not that the talent is lacking. It's just that the information to make the match, like I said, the role skill profiling, which you spoke about earlier, is lacking. So two cultural failures that I've noticed, over a period of time that typically appear when we look at internal hiring is the role clarity failure. Teams ideally don't know what the role demands in terms of skills and outcomes because, again, relates to the very basic thing. They don't have a talent digital roadmap, right? And that's where it fails. Also, the talent visibility failure. So employees have rich skills, but they cannot actually use the opportune moment and they cannot signal them out. So skills are not really visible to people. And these are two main things that it fails. The third one, which I've seen in most cases, may not be related to talent or anything, but what it happens is it could be related to cultural aspects as well. Culturally, what do I mean by that? When I say culturally, it means that if I am supposing a team lead and I'm managing 40 people, if I get promoted and I suddenly have to manage a team with 400 people, the whole ballgame changes, right? Then I may be functionally very correct and very strong, but my people management skills come to light, right? So there are various other nuances as well. And therefore, what happens, right? When internal hiring fails, the employees typically get misplaced or they get overlooked, and both becomes a problem. So the employee will start thinking, hey, you know what? I changed my team. I came into this role, but I don't think I'm very valued over here. The manager then starts thinking, you know what? Maybe this was told to me and I did it, but internal talent doesn't really work. Internal mobility doesn't really work. But in reality, if you take a step back and you check, I would say both are victims of a system where there is low information in that ecosystem, right? And that is the challenge with internal mobility. And therefore, the modern things that we are seeing with AI and stuff has a very critical role to play.
You guys are working in the same space, like you guys are helping organization to deal with the same issue. What are the solutions or what are the steps that you would suggest for organization to deal with this issue?
So I think a lot of organizations today have lack of visibility of the skills. They don't know what skills they want. Today, if you want to, a simple example, I was talking to a large conglomerate and they manage the entire piece from how once a person is hired all the way to succession planning. The entire talent life cycle is surprisingly managed on Excel sheets, of course, with some macros and various things, but still, right? In today's day and age, where technology is available at the click of a button, you are managing an entire skill ontology, whatever you want to call it, on an Excel sheet is very shocking. And therefore, can you imagine the leakage of talent that is happening over there? So that's why, some of these are very, very critical things that need to be avoided. And therefore, I think, you need to use technology more effectively. There's one thing which is called working on AI, and there's one thing which is called working with AI.
This brings me to a very interesting question. Then, does AI in talent works, or like it will take time for organizations, or how organizations are like adopting to it?
Yeah, that's a interesting one, right? And that's a big question today. Honest answer that I can give you is not because I'm associated or anything with AI in a large way, but AI works beautifully in talent. Let's be very clear about it. But it also requires a lot of, I would say, intelligence and planning together, right? And less so when companies try to use AI to replace human judgment. That's the last thing that AI is designed to do. You don't want to work with a company that is using AI, or if a company uses AI, to be very clear, to replace humans, then that is not the best way to do it. That's the easiest way. That's the simplest way for the leadership to look at it. But when you actually start using AI to expand your horizon, it works a little better. So today, if you ask me, AI is already providing value in 2 or 3 small zones that we see across the spectrum, not just necessarily IT or ITES or any of those, right? You look at assessments. Till date, assessments have been done in a very different manner. Today, AI is providing value with structure. Most important, reduce human intervention, so reduce bias that is there. And very critical, it's scalable, tremendously scalable. Also, what we spoke a little while back in terms of skill matching. How do you match a skill? Nobody has the time to go ahead and go through it. Today, it's done with a role fit, a project fit, or a hiring fit. It can be done automated through AI in a matter of seconds, right? People want a growth path. How do I grow in an organization? Most organizations don't have an answer, or the answer is what we spoke about, or push them into some learning culture, right? So that is not really the best way to go about it. So IDPs which are created, which are personalized learning maps, which are driven by real gaps, not just notional ones. So these are places where AI is already providing a lot of value. And then, of course, we're moving on to succession planning and various things. So, but AI introduces, when you use AI in talent, it introduces something which is very important for you, right? It introduces a new responsibility around bias, governance, trust. Because, see, you have to understand that talent decisions typically are high stakes. They change careers, they impact individuals, they change salaries, and they impact reputation. So, on a personal front, there's a lot for people to look at from a talent perspective. That is why AI is going to be even more so successful in talent, because it is going to be able to explain why the model recommended X, or why somebody else has been nominated for a particular position compared to the other one. And that's how you build trust in an organization, right? So that's how AI in talent is working. And it's not about, like I said, replacing humans. It's about replacing the guesswork and the human bias that exists in the system more effectively.
That sounds super interesting. Like, tell me more about like when you said AI in talent is not about replacing people. It's about replacing guesswork. Like, tell me more about that. Like how this works, or how a human and AI can work together. And see, as market is moving in 2026, like people are like bit scared. Each and everybody thinks that AI will replace them. So how this synergy, like how things will move hand to hand?
Yeah, it's more of a thought question than a narrative, but I'll try and throw some light through what we do in terms of this, right? Today, if you look at a typical traditional system that exists, let's look at it right from the hiring piece. Just to create a job description, there are some organizations for a normal job description, they take about 2 weeks. That's the manual effort. If it's a very niche role, they'll move slightly longer. It takes close to about a month just to get a job description done. Then once that job description is done and becomes a job role, you get into the hiring framework. You've already lost 1 month over there. Understand there is also the deployment factor that is there. You need to fill that role really quick, right? That pressure is always mounting. Then you come to the part that once a person is hired, what do you do with that person? People really don't know. What they generally do is put them into an onboarding program, which is the general trend, and they go. Once a person is tenured in the organization for about a year or so, they're going to look at what is my career looking for? How do I enhance my career? What is my career path? Again, human bias comes in over there. If I know you, I will push you. And I will say, do this, then you will move. If people don't have exposure to that, if people don't know the right people in large organizations, they are lost in the system. There is no clearly defined career path for them. There is no clearly defined, I would say, roadmap for them as well, right? So that's what AI can fill that gap over there. After that, you want to create an individual development plan for them. How do you do that? Today, there is no expertise to create assessments as quickly as required, right? To promote people, to move them up the cycle. So AI can again play a very critical role. And we just spoke about that, right? So AI can create your assessments, which are structured, which are more bias reduced assessments as such, and you can scale them. So that is where IDPs can come into play. Then you also have the aspect of succession planning, which is very, very critical to organizations. In succession planning, again, you have the complexity where roles can become critical, but the talent to fill that role or the person to fill the next in succession may not be ready. And then you push in somebody at a nascent stage into a role. He's not ready to manage that kind of succession that has come upon him. And that's where the challenges start. So, ideally speaking, these are the areas that we really need to look at. And this is where AI is playing a very, very critical role in that sense.
What is one simple step, or like suggest me some simple steps that a company can take right now to make their HR decisions better?
If you notice, I am the co-founder of Third Bracket. In one sentence, I would say adopt Third Bracket. It's the talent intelligence platform that is stitched together for everything. Right. It is a new age SaaS. And I'm just going to take a little time before we kind of close out in terms of narrating. Ideally, what can Third Bracket do? Right. So Third Bracket typically exists in this new era where skills are fluid, your organizations are global, strategy changes it changes faster than structures, right? And workforce planning is no longer an annual exercise that it used to be. It's continuous, all the time growing. So companies that win are not the ones ideally with the biggest headcount, but they are the ones with the clearest map of talent. They are the ones with the shortest distance that they can map between capability and the opportunity. That is most important for them. So skill intelligence is that map. Internal mobility is that engine. And AI is the accelerant over there. That's your catalyst, right? And the digital road mapping is how we cover all these three. So Third Bracket typically would help an organization enhance its entire talent framework, right? So right from the time to hiring, all the way to succession planning, everything is stitched onto one platform. With Third Bracket, you can create your JDs within minutes, or rather seconds now. You can create an individual development plan for your employees within seconds. And you can also see where they stand, give them the skill gaps, and you can also create a succession planning framework continuously if you want to, with the help of AI. So at Third Bracket, we say we want to work with AI and help leverage companies with the talent workforce. That's what the message is for everyone.
Thank you so much, Pat. It was really an honor to talk someone like you. Thank you for giving time and sharing your insights. Thank you so much for watching this podcast till the end.